We hebben vanavond een grootheid in de uitzending, David Icke. David, welcome in our live program. How are you?
I'm good, you?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's an honor to have you here. I'm sure you saw the speech of Javier Milei. Do you agree with his criticism?
Well, you know, what you've got is a polarity that's emerged, not least with the alternative media becoming supporters of what you might call the right, and anyone that criticizes the left becomes a kind of hero of the alternative media. And while I'm absolutely against the destruction and suppression of freedom by governments, and he was articulate on that, I want to see the alternative, because there were some things in there that were a bit concerning, like when he was talking about not wanting a regulation or the dismantling of monopolies. And, you know, people say, okay, everyone's getting tired of authority, all right, but what's authority? People think that authority is just government. It's not. It's also monopolizing corporations who are dictating to people what's going to happen and what isn't. When you have monopolies, for instance, that can then decide what is published and what is not published, what is allowed to be posted and what is not. And so I want to see what Milei has as an alternative, and not just take it that because he's telling people in the alternative media and of the right what they want to hear, which is, oh, we must stop government regulation. It doesn't mean that the alternative is going to be any better, and we've got to wait and see what that is in terms of what happens in Argentina. Because, you know, what we have is this polarization where one says white, and because they say white, the other has to say black. But actually, the truth is almost every time in the shades of gray. And so if we have no regulation at all of monopolies and their imposition on society, then that's a form of authoritarian dictatorship, in the same way as having unchecked regulation, which allows the political side of authority to dictate what happens in society. And, you know, I've been uncovering this manipulation now for 34 years. There was no alternative media when I started out. I've watched it appear. And what you grasp is that this, what I call global cult that manifests as the World Economic Forum and the Bill Gates operation, etc., the World Health Organization, it's not just working through one side in politics or one ideology. It's working through all of them. And so what you have is governments controlled by this cult, quite demonstrably, but so are corporations, and they're serving the same agenda. So if we move from, we've got to stop government authority imposing, to allowing corporate authority to impose, the same cult is still calling the shots.
David, I have some more questions. David, I have some more questions.
It's time just to take a step back and not react just because someone's telling us what we want to hear.
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying. I want to say furthermore that you were a great inspiration for me personally to start up this channel in the beginning of COVID. I was watching Brian Rose interviewing you several times, and gave me a lot of energy to move on. And now we have reached millions of people in the Netherlands, spreading the word. But so thank you for that inspiration. But I have more questions for you. Also, some guests here on the table want to ask you some questions. Tom, one of the persons here. But what I would like to know is, do you consider Javier Milei as a false prophet, or is he just walking the wrong path?
Well, we're going to see that with how he runs Argentina from here. What I'm saying is words are easy, and actions are less easy, and we've got to see what form those actions take. Because, like I say, if we're moving from the regulation and authority being imposed by government to a corporate free-for-all, in which it's just an unfettered corporate fest to impose their will on the population, well, we've not moved forward very far. And like I say, we've got to start looking at the shades of grey. You know, all regulation is not bad. It's massive over-regulation and total regulation, which is where we're moving. That's what the problem is. But without any regulation at all, then your Amazons and your major global corporations are going to run riot. And that's something that we have to be very careful about.
I do understand what you're saying, David. Here in the studio we have Tom van Lamoen. He's a libertarian in the Netherlands, and he would like to ask you some questions as well.
Okay.
Sure. Hey, David Icke. Well, yeah, I truly agree with everything you're saying, that behind the scenes that the corporations have as much power as the governments and are mostly the problem themselves. But yeah, and of course I agree as well that we have to see what Milei is worth, you know, and talk is easy, but we have to see the actions. But well, I'm a libertarian, and Milei is an Austrian economist, and the way that he explains himself and the way that he makes people conscious of also private industry and organizations like central banks, I think it's a big win for society, because central banks are private entities. And also in his speech on Davos, he calls out companies that are parasiting on governments, like Amazon and like all the big companies. Truly, in my opinion, get their power from lobbying with government, and without the government, they would not be entirely as big as they are now.
Yeah, I mean, the point I would make, going back to this global cult, this network of secret societies that is behind world events, they are controlling the corporations as they're controlling the governments. And that's why I mean, you will obviously see this. That's why they're moving as one unit. If you're looking at the woke agenda, the climate change hoax agenda, and all these moves towards the digital currency and digital control and the digital concentration camp, then governments are moving that way through legislation, and corporations are moving that way via the way they run their companies and the way they are running the policies that are affecting the whole of society. So we're not looking at an either or. We're looking at a both. And that's why I say it's very important that we don't throw babies out with bathwater and think, okay, so we're going to get rid of or challenge government imposition, and forget that, you know, the major global corporations are actually controlled by the same force that's working through governments, the same force that's working through the European Union, that's turned that from the start into a tyranny, as anyone with a brain cell could have predicted, is the same force that's running the corporations. So what I'm saying is it's very important that we don't just jump on the black or the white, but we take a step back and look at it from a much wider perspective. The other thing about Milei's speech is that he was focusing a lot on what he called economic growth. We must have economic growth. But economic growth, while I've been looking at that since the 1980s, it's a very, very poor and inefficient way of judging the benefits of us to a society economically, because what it's basically measuring is the amount of monies that's changing hands for goods and services and whether that all goes up and what have you. So that means that every time something happens that's very bad for society, and we'd rather not have it, if it means money changing hands and profits being made, then economic growth ticks that as a positive for society when it's not. And I think it's a very, very kind of hammer tool to judge economic benefit. Just economic growth. It's a very old and tired way of looking at the world, I think.
Yes, I agree totally. And this is what I'm saying every time I'm on air. It's in the, like when you see the CPI or all those models they have, it's just inflation is pushing up these numbers. So it's totally fake. But that's what I'm saying. If you listen to Milei a lot, and he's very criticizing the central banks in how they push up with inflation and money printing, push up this way of economic value. So I truly think we need to see what Milei does. But interpreting his speech myself, I know when he talks about economic growth, it's more about production and welfare for the people.
Yeah, I just hope that he's streetwise to how it all really works, though, and just see left and right, because the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, that coordinates policy, as you will know, through the central banks, is owned by this cult. They're orchestrating it, but the cult also owns the corporations. It also owns the governments, because it's been going for so long and has expanded its reach to such an extent that it's now dictating global events. And, if we're not streetwise on that and we fall into the left bad, right good, then we can get ourselves in a right mess.
Sure. David, last question from me. Do you see a growing resistance against this globalism that you call a global cult?
Yes, I do. I mean, when I started out 34 years ago on this journey, I couldn't fill a phone box with interest. No one was interested. But now, I mean, it's fantastic. And like I say, I watched the alternative media appear. It didn't exist when I started out and for a long time afterwards. But what I have seen recently, and I think it's something to be very aware of and very careful about, is the way that the alternative media, or what I call the mainstream version of it, has started to focus almost entirely on the political level of all this. And it's therefore started to polarize. If you look at the alternative media in America, for instance, it started to polarize into right-wing politics good, support Trump, left-wing politics bad, and what is that? See, when the alternative media started to appear, what we were saying is countries are one-party states, and this force is working through both political wings. So whoever's in power, the cult is in power. And that seems to have been forgotten by a lot of people, especially people that have come into the alternative media in recent times, not least since the COVID card was played. They've come in and they've lost that basic idea that it's a one-party state. Yes, there will be some politicians that are genuine, of course, but generally it's a one-party state where any party that has the power to form a government is ultimately answering to this cult. And therefore, to say, MAGA, right-wing republicanism is the answer, is just going down a very, very old road where we've already been, and it's led nowhere.
Yeah, I said last question, but I have more questions for you, David. I'm really curious. Are you still a prisoner in the Isle of Man? Are you still not allowed to travel?
No, the Isle of Wight, actually.
Isle of Wight, okay.
The Isle of Man has tax benefits. The Isle of Wight's like everywhere else.
Sorry for that.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing, you see, I find quite extraordinary, is that you can be banned from 27 European countries because of the actions of the Dutch government. It's going to be 29 by March, apparently. I can be banned from Australia. And
why are you so dangerous in their perspective?
Yeah,
what is so dangerous about David Icke to travel in these Schengen countries?
What I'm actually doing, funnily enough, given the what we've been talking about, is I'm not going down that left-right route, that left-right explanation. I'm saying that actually all these things are controlled by the same force, and if you don't see that, then you can be working for this force while thinking you're working against it. And there's a lot of people in America who support the whole Trump phenomenon, but were falling for it. I mean, if you look at, again, not words, but actions, what someone like Trump, who claims to stand for freedom, would have done at the end of his last presidency is to pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. Instead, he used the power of pardon to pardon a bunch of crooks, including his son-in-law, Jared Kushner's father. It was Trump that claims credit and still claims credit for pushing through the Operation Warp Speed fake vaccine program. So
what is your conclusion? So what is your conclusion?
So now we're having, again, this next side of Trump, or the next stage of Trump, where they're now saying, yeah, he'll be president. And what I'm hearing is exactly the same that I heard the last time, which is, get Trump in, Trump's the savior, Trump's the man who will sort it out.
But I assume you don't prefer Joe Biden.
No, I don't prefer Joe Biden. That's
so what is left for us to choose?
This is an interesting point. This is one of the major reasons why politics is such a diversion, because the number of people that are pulling the strings of the world is absolutely tiny compared with the apparently 8 billion people in the world having their strings pulled. And therefore, there's no way a few can control the many if the many won't cooperate or won't allow themselves to be divided to fight among each other, not least politically. It's not possible. If we won't cooperate with the few have no power. But what we have is this political system where people are persuaded that to change anything, you have to have a politician do it for you. So it's like what this cult is doing through the political system is buying time. So, okay, Trump's the savior, okay, and then 4 years later you realize he's not. But the cult has had 4 years to advance its agenda.
So do you consider him controlled opposition, or is he just a useful idiot?
Well, he could be either, but anybody who thinks that Trump is going to change anything of substance, even if he gets in again, it's like, my father used to say that second and third marriages are the triumph of hope over experience. And I think that's true of a lot of stuff that goes on in politics, including what's going on with Trump. The point is, if you look at the number of people who were supporting Trump, what was it, 70-odd million, apparently, at the last election. What if that 70-odd million just stopped cooperating with the system, stopped cooperating with their own enslavement, stopped doing what the few tell them to do? Would that make more of a difference than voting for Trump and saying, well, we hope he'll be all right and save us in the next 4 years? Of course it would.
So what you're saying is we shouldn't...
By the political answer, you're giving your power away to a politician who then 4 years later, 5 years later, you say, well, it didn't really change much, did it?
Are you saying that we shouldn't vote at all?
Well, I've not voted for a very long time, living memory, because if I'm going to vote for someone, I want a choice. I don't want an illusion of choice. So in Britain at the moment, we have a Conservative government led by Rishi Sunak, who is absolutely owned to his DNA by this global cult and connects into the whole tech arena of control and AI via his family connections. And the opposition in this country, who is very likely to get in, God help us if they do, is the Labour Party of a man called Keir Starmer, who, if he gets in, he will be Britain's Joe Biden. It will be unfettered cult agenda being imposed on the people, all the climate agenda, all the woke agenda in all its forms. It's going to be on steroids if Keir Starmer gets in. So where's the choice? You can have the cult agenda a little more slowly, or the cult agenda on steroids. And it's by thinking the political system is actually going to change anything, that's the problem. That's the diversion. We, the people. I mean, how many people live in the Netherlands compared with the number of people dictating to the people of the Netherlands? The ratios are ridiculous. The few can only control the many by the acquiescence of the many and by the many obeying what the few tell them to do. If we stop and say, hold on a minute, is this just? Is this fair to everybody? No, it's not, so we're not doing it. Then the political authority ceases to be. And this is the way that this house of cards is coming down. And it is a house of cards because the people, through their acquiescence and obedience to authority, are holding the house of cards up. If we stop doing it, it would fall. It's a psychological trick, and giving your power away to politicians is fundamental to that trick.
Thank you, David Icke, for your contribution and inspiration. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.